Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Diminishing Returns. As always, I am Sol, and joining me is Alan.
Hello.
And an extra special, really exciting guest, I think, this week. We are joined by Mr. Tim Batt. We are basically piggybacking off his incredible piece of, I would almost call it performance art, the worst idea of all time this week, which is one of the podcasts I listened to when I was first getting into podcasts. It was a very formative show for me from a podcast point of view. I must have mentioned it on the show before, Alan. Have I?
Yeah.
But for anyone listening who doesn't know, The Worst Idea of All Time is a show where Tim and his co-host Guy, they watch and review the film Grown Ups 2 every single week for a year, and then other films in subsequent seasons. And it really is just a portrait of people kind of inflicting a breakdown upon themselves.
Yeah, that's accurate. It's a good description, I think.
So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Tim.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, I know you've, answered questions like this before, but I've got to ask, what led you to start the concept of that show? Why Grown Ups 2?
The why is the question, isn't it? And it's one that we've been asked so many times because we started doing this podcast, bloody nearing on 8 years now, and I still don't think we've got a good answer for that. But the closest I can get to is that it was kind of the worst idea of all time, which is the podcast. It was a solution in the middle of a bunch of things we were trying to do. So Guy and I met on a TV show that Guy was hosting for public access. It wasn't public access. It was a free-to-air, youth-focused TV station that lasted a very short amount of time in New Zealand. It was a bit of an experiment. And I came on and reviewed toilets as a segment on a Monday night. And Guy and I think that was the first time I'd met Guy. And I just came on because I did a bit of stand-up. I was just sort of starting out back then. So I was like, this is a great idea. This would be a funny segment. And we instantly had this on-screen rapport where we were just super antagonistic to one another, particularly Guy to me, and we hit it off immediately, and just it was quite good, to the point where a lot of Guy's friends were messaging him being like, you need to lay off that Tim guy, like he's going through some stuff, he's trying to do a public service here, reviewing restrooms, and you're kicking a man while he's down. So it was a lot of fun, and it garnered a bit of a sort of fan following in its own way. And then the station went away. I was working in radio at the time, and we just thought of it one day as a project to continue doing something fun together. There already back then, there was so many movie review podcasts. I think movie review was kind of, like the OG genre of podcast in a lot of ways. And I just wanted to find what's the twist that we could do on that? And it just, a movie review podcast where the movie never changes just struck me as like the funniest possible subversion of the genre. And then the funniest thing, a sequel to a movie we hadn't watched that was notoriously average. It just seemed, it ticked all the boxes.
Well, I mean, it worked for me because, I've certainly spoken about it on this show before, that I don't really, as much as I do a film podcast myself, I don't really enjoy listening to them.
Yeah.
And your show is very much one of the exceptions to the rule. It really is
sweet.
And I'd never watched Grown Ups 2 either until the other day in preparation for this record. So that was a really quite surreal experience, because I had seen Grown Ups years ago, and I had to basically double check several times that I was definitely not watching Grown Ups, and I was watching Grown Ups 2, because bits of it seemed so familiar from hearing them, discussed in detail for 52 plus hours. It was really bizarre. Deja vu.
Well, bizarre for you. I just watched it for the first time in 7 years for the 55th time, I think.
Oh wow! Is that the first time you've gone back to it since? Or
yeah? Why the hell? Why would I revisit it? It was just for you two. It was just for you guys. Just for this podcast.
Just check in once a year, just check in, see it hasn't changed.
I thought I'd never have to revisit this film again in my life.
Well, I mean, another show that you're involved with that I'm also a big fan of is Till Death Do Us Blart, which is much the same thing with Paul Blart Mall Cop, but that is once every year for all time. So
that's right.
Yeah, I suppose you wouldn't want to throw Grown Ups 2 into the mix as well. But yeah, Alan, I recall this being a real bone of contention amongst us at Alan and I met at university. We did a film course. So, we're kind of poncy, pretentious film people. And
someone should be.
I remember Alan being the guy who liked Grown Ups and everyone else on our course kind of, giving him a hard time for it. Is that accurate, Alan?
Well, my weakness in terms of film is comedy. Like, just silly comedy. I can sit and watch it, not analyze it, just enjoy it. Yeah, whatever, it's fine. That's why I like Vince Vaughn, right?
Yeah. Alan is famously a fan of the Big Mama's House trilogy.
Awesome.
So I think I watched it on that level and just was like, yeah, it's good. They're having some fun. It's fine. I will say I rewatched Grown Ups prior to this, and yes, the cracks are certainly there. And I still think that when I watch that, I get a sense that they're having fun together and it's generating enough comedy because they are skilled comedians that it's watchable. I wouldn't say it was good.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, yeah.
But then, of course, I did watch Grown Ups 2 as well, which is a significant drop in
Is it
quality.
Really? Because as I say, I watched Grown Ups. I think I may have watched it with you even when we moved in together briefly after university as a kind of house, go on then, let's see how bad this film is. And I don't remember anything about it, but I had given it 2 out of 10 on IMDb, which suggests that I didn't like it. But I chose not to rewatch it for this, because I thought, well, I want as close to the Grown Ups 2 experience as possible, which is I think you watch it as a standalone film.
Well, I'll say then that, Grown Ups at least has a plot. First of all,
okay,
it has a
central
plot. And it feels like they're working towards an end goal and riffing and improvising a little bit within that, as opposed to everyone perhaps accidentally bumping into each other at a barbecue and then filming it.
Because if I've only seen Grown Ups once ever. And from memory...
That's the appropriate number of times, by the way.
I think so, yeah. Well, wait till I tell you about Grown Ups too, my friend. The first one centers around them coming together because the high school coach, I think, who was like this beloved figure, passes away and they all go to the wake.
Well, yes.
And Lenny Fader has been this hometown boy made good in Hollywood and comes back to his mates.
That's it, yeah. Although actually, you say high school coach, the flashback we see is them at age 11 or maybe 12, and it seems to have and they win the 12-year-old big game.
Right.
And that seems to be the crucial moment in all their lives, which is weird. It's like it's not the big high school championship. It's some weird little league thing. But the coach has remained a presence in their lives for some reason.
That was the highlight. Things didn't get better after age 12. That's the indictment.
Exactly.
You were a fan of Grown Ups, Alan. How come you didn't watch Grown Ups 2 until now?
I had seen it. When I watched it again, I watched it last night, and definitely I remembered bits of it. So I definitely seen it, although it was vague memories. I don't know what circumstances I watched it under, but maybe it's just a very immemorable film.
We've never really touched on Adam Sandler on this show before, but it is odd that you like Grown Ups.
Touch on him now.
Yeah, because I remember making you watch Jack and Jill as a kind of this will be so bad it's good. We can enjoy Al Pacino, doing whatever he's doing in that film. And you were really angry about it. You did not like Jack and Jill at all. And I find that odd because...
You find that odd?
Well, it's not a good film, but it's kind of the same thing that Grown Ups is, surely?
No.
Well, I think...
No. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to stop you there. Jack and Jill is on a completely different plane of cinematic existence to almost any film I've ever seen. You were asking why Alan got mad? I totally understand that. It is infuriating
Well, to be fair, I wasn't really watching the film so much as I was watching Alan react to the film, so I probably remember it being more fun than it was.
You should give it a proper go and really experience that movie, because it is shocking.
That's what it is, and it's same with Grown Ups too as well. I think what's really annoying about it is the laziness. It's the complete lack of effort. The knowledge that they can take a shit on a plate and serve it to you, and people will eat it. And knowing that and not caring, and just going, okay, I'll do that. 20 million, okay, cheers.
Well, I mean,
I appreciate people sell out, but
one of the things that really struck me with the film was how it seemed like all the cast, and there's a lot of really talented people involved in this film, it seemed like all the cast were bringing their absolute A game to their performances. Like they weren't just phoning in those performances. They were really going for it.
Are we talking about Grown Ups 2 now?
Yeah.
I disagree. I'll give you David Spade, but I won't give you Chris Rock. That is not Chris Rock in, in any way, shape, or form.
I don't know. Yeah, okay, to be fair. I mean, Chris Rock's not the best actor. He's, as much as I like him, I rarely see him.
Stand-up.
Yeah.
He's a director now.
John Lovitz was giving it all he had. And
yes.
I'm trying to remember who. I mean, there's so many people in it. Steve Buscemi certainly was, bringing a lot more to it than he needed to for his little...
Salma Hayek?
Yeah, she was, I was really surprised at how invested everyone seemed to be in the film. And I guess that probably speaks to, well, they are all just a bunch of friends having a nice time together. And, they couldn't be bothered to write a film to shoot when the cameras were rolling, but now they're there, they're going to put some effort in. They're
very good actors. I think it would be very hard for a professional sports person to, calm down and play social footy. You know what I mean? And by the same token, I think it's quite hard for Steve Buscemi, no matter what script he's delivered or context, the cinema cameras are arriving in, it's hard for him to not go a hundo with his putting his foot down on his performance.
But apparently it's very easy for Adam Sandler to do that, which perhaps that's his skill. Well, as a professional, he can just turn it off and go, do you know what? I'm not going to write this script. I'm not going to try and act.
Yeah.
But, well, how do we feel about Adam Sandler then? Because, I mean, for me, he was a fairly big part of my, teenage years. There was probably a time where I would have said Little Nicky was maybe not my favourite film of all time, but top 5. I definitely wore out that VHS tape I had. Everyone at school loved Happy Gilmore, and, I remember someone bringing that in one day to get us to watch it at school. On like the last day of term, they let us put a video on and someone brought Happy Gilmore in. So, I have quite fond memories of Adam Sandler. But then obviously, it's no secret there is a very distinctive moment when he retired to his, Hollywood mansion and stopped making art. It just became, commerce.
This is the amazing thing about Adam Sandler, is that he came back. Like... Punch Drunk Love came out, that was a while ago now, 6-7
Probably
years?
nearly 20 years now, is it, Punch Drunk Love?
What?
It was 2000
really?
It was 2000 and something, right?
Oh my God,
was
okay.
It?
I don't know if I've actually ever seen it, but I know he was very lauded for his performance in that, and the movie that I have seen very recently was Uncut Gems.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you guys checked out.
That's the one Adam Sandler film we have touched on this podcast. And yeah, I can't remember, Alan. Did you like it? I know I was a very big fan.
Yeah, I liked it, but I don't think it was quite a revelation that people see it. I've seen Adam Sandler do some great acting.
He's a very good actor.
And straight acting as well, not even necessarily all that comedic. So... the example that's jumping to mind for me is, Punch Drunk Love. What's the other one he did more recently? Funny People, which is obviously is a comedy, but, a bit more straight.
I was a huge fan of Funny People when it came out because it was so clearly, Adam Sandler playing himself and addressing what he'd done with his career.
Well, I think some of the crucial things we're dealing with here is the difference between Adam Sandler as a performer and Adam Sandler as a writer and creative force behind the project that he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the major difference. Perhaps we have to accept that Adam Sandler's sense of humor is sort of crude and pathetic and childish.
Well, I do think he's somewhat aware of what he's doing. I like that, there was a lot of talk of him getting an Oscar for Uncut Gems, and then, of course, he didn't even get nominated. But he said in the promotional tour for it that if he didn't get a nomination, he was going to make the worst film he possibly could as revenge.
He said he was going to make Grown Ups 3.
He's done a film since, hasn't he? Was that Hubie Halloween thing that I saw pop up on Netflix? Was that after Uncut Gems?
I think he might have done a few of those, perhaps, of those kind of Netflixy, what formerly was known as a straight-to-video style of movie, home video. But I guess it's, everything is streaming now, even if it's big. But because he had a deal with Netflix to do, was it 7 movies a little while ago?
It was one of the first sort of huge streaming deals that they made when Netflix was kind of taking off. Yeah, I think he's about halfway through that deal now, because he did that film with Jennifer Aniston. And that Western that I know you watched, Alan.
Yeah, The Ridiculous Six, that's what it's called. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for something to replace Grown Ups 2, that's a good that's the same thing, really. It is just an inexplicable series of sketches that aren't funny, actors embarrassing themselves. It's unbelievable. And Grown Ups 2 definitely falls into that. But at least with Grown Ups 2, you get the sense that they're having fun together. Where on that, you don't at all. It's really quite
were they shooting out in the desert? That's probably the difference.
Yeah, they weren't actually shooting at Adam Sandler's summer house.
By virtue of the project of just spending a whole year watching and reviewing this one film, we became... Guy and I sort of a magnet for information about the production of the film, and some people who worked on Grown Ups 2 got in touch with us as well, and your assumptions are 100% correct. Like, those guys were fucking around hard. There was apparently a lot of basketball being played by the leading men, so much so that it was sort of endangering budgets and timelines and stuff, which I think is why you get this sense that some of these scenes are like so rushed, and it's like, was that really the best take of that ad-lib scene? It's because they were playing basketball the whole time.
That is a crucial difference between that and the first film. I think that's probably the difference. It's like the first film, they've done 3 goes at it and they've picked the best one. They've all improv some lines and they've cut them in. Whereas this one, it feels like they've had one go at it and gone, yeah, all right. And it's just not as funny. And these guys... they're all comedians. They are all generating their own material, so you have them riffing off each other. It should work. But at the same time, I mean, my knowledge of groups of comedians, particularly sort of that era, sort of American stand-ups, is that when they get together and riff off each other, it's pretty brutal and horrible, and they're just cutting each other down at every possible opportunity. And that doesn't quite fit with the tone of this piece. They're all friends, and really, at the end of the day, they're sticking up for each other. And perhaps it lacks an edge because of that. Like, they're all just pulling their punches slightly.
Mm.
But in Grown Ups 2, they didn't even bother, really, to do any jokes.
I found it really interesting how many people in this film there were who I didn't realise, just do the Adam Sandler film circuit. There were all these people, it's like, oh, I recognise that face. Well, I've not seen them in 10 years because I last saw them in an Adam Sandler film in the 90s, and that's all they've done since. There were... that guy from one of the main group of friends, I forget his name, but he's in, is it Airheads or Benchwarmers, whatever that film is that you made me watch, Alan? And
what did he look like? And I'll tell you who it is.
He's the guy who goes surfing on top of the bus in an inflatable dinghy.
It's Nick Swardson is his name.
Yeah, like, I've seen him in things, but I forgot he existed because I haven't seen him in anything without Adam Sandler for a decade.
He had one shot at his own film, and I'm trying to remember what it was called. Ducky... what was it? It was about him becoming a porn star.
Bucky Larson.
Yes, that's it.
Bucky Larson, Born to be a Star, which is, of course, a Happy Gilmore. It's not really Happy Gilmore. It is a Happy Madison production, Adam Sandler's production company. So there you go. It pays to be Adam Sandler's friend if you want to make your own film.
I think that's my favourite part of Grown Ups 2 is the Happy Madison logo, because it has the guy from Happy Gilmore sort of pop up, and it reminded me of that film and how much fun it is.
Did you really not enjoy any part of the film though, Sol? Surely there was...
I'll be honest. I was really surprised at how enjoyable I found this film. Like, I'm not going to say I enjoyed it, but, you know, there were jokes that worked for me. I think there was a moment that made me laugh out loud. I can't remember what it was, but I will have written it down in my notes somewhere. Here we are. I found it. It's, there's a bit where I think it's when John Lovitz is hijacking the like aerobics yoga class as he's like a janitor who's pretending to be the instructor so he can make all the women slap themselves on their butts and stuff. There's a bit at the end of that scene when he's rumbled where a kid just runs up and bites him on the leg. And that made me laugh because it just seemed really, really bizarre detail. And I don't know if that's like a callback to the first film because that kid bit some more people throughout the film as it went on. But
no, that child is a pregnancy in the first film.
Right.
So it's not in it. But I did laugh a couple of times out loud, but I was laughing at this sort of, I can't believe they actually just did that.
I did that as well. There was a line that made me laugh out loud because I couldn't believe that was the joke they'd gone with, which was when the two policemen were looking at this, you know, attractive blonde woman at the school recital. And the line I wrote down was, "I want to arrest her for disturbing the peace in my pants." Yeah, I think, like you said, that's the first take, the first idea.
At least I feel like that was a knowing a character doing a bad joke.
I hope
like
so.
The character isn't funny. That I think that's the idea.
Okay. I couldn't quite tell with this film. There were a lot of moments like that where it's like, is that?
Yeah, I think you're giving them too much credit, Alan, to be honest.
I think the only legitimate laugh I had was when they get attacked by the frat boys or whatever, and Chris Rock says,
"I can't believe nobody's even scared of a black guy anymore! Damn you, Obama!"
And that was the one laugh I got.
That's a good line. That's funny. There's a couple lines though, I think that just the pure delivery is good. John Lovitz saying, "I'm having a wonderful time," will always slay me. It doesn't matter how many times I see that, I will always love it. It's so good.
Well, I think that whole John Lovitz thing, I think, when John Lovitz first turned up and he's doing the aerobics class, and it's obviously the creepy guy getting them to bend over and stuff, I thought to myself, I bet this goes nowhere and has no relevance to anything. And indeed, I was absolutely correct. They do a little sort of very vague like callback to it, like you just mentioned. But that's every scene that came up. I was like, I wonder if this will pay off in any way other than in this very moment. Is this setting up anything? And very rarely was it doing that.
Is John Lovitz playing that character in every Adam Sandler movie? Because I remember that he's like a pervy guy at the start of Little Nicky, from what I remember, who gets, you know, he's being a peeping Tom and then he gets killed and sent to hell. So
this is basically what John Lovitz does with his career, isn't it? It's just,
well, yeah, I mean, I guess everything I've seen him in, he kind of pops up for a scene that doesn't really make sense and, you know, steals the show and then leaves pretty much. But I don't know, is there a kind of Sandlerverse going on? Because what's his name? Rob Schneider plays that guy who shouts "You can do it" in all his films, and Steve Buscemi certainly played, was he called Crazy Eyes in several of his films? Although he's a different guy in this one.
Rob Schneider's not actually in Grown Ups 2 whatsoever. He's in Grown Ups 1, but then we don't talk about what happened with Rob Schneider, but something happened. I genuinely don't know what happened. I think they had a falling out.
He had his own sitcom for a while. It's like he sort of tried to...
Yes, I've watched all of that too. I cannot stress to you. So Guy and I have watched all of... It's called Real Rob. It's on Netflix. If you have even a cursory interest in television production, it is an insanely entertaining watch. The first season... there's so much wrong with it, but this is just such an interesting detail for me. The color saturation on it is off the charts. Like, it's amazing that it made it onto the platform. Everyone looks like they've got radioactive eyes. Like, everyone's just got these glowing green blue eyes. It's a bizarre show.
Well, the fact that Rob Schneider is missing is a pretty big deal, I think, because he is in Grown Ups. He's one of the Grown Ups. He's one of the main cast. And according to the internet, anyway, they didn't fall out or anything. He was just busy doing something else. But the fact that they never even mention the character, they didn't get him in for a couple of days just to do him one scene.
They don't even have like a photo of him on screen. At one point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does seem an odd choice, but they've worked together since. So obviously,
have they?
Yeah, he's in the Ridiculous Six. He's one of them.
Okay.
Rob Schneider is visibly a tough hang. Like, all those other guys, I think, get on really well. There's an interview junket that they're doing, and I'm trying to remember what it's for. Maybe it was the Ridiculous Six, and so it's on. They're on Conan at one point, and you've got Sandler, Kevin James, I think Chris Rock's there, Nick Swardson's definitely there. And Rob Schneider's just at the back. And at one point, Rob Schneider just goes, I feel like I'm in the audience. Because he hasn't, got a joke in with the fellas. And it's the most fucking heartbreaking admission of not being in the in-group I've seen on television before.
Even in Grown Ups, even the character that he plays, he's the one that they don't particularly like. They're all friends and they get on, but he's the dickhead. They just can't hang out with.
I'll speak to that in that, I kind of, as much as Adam Sandler, doesn't care anymore, I have a real soft spot for him. There's a warmth that comes, from him on screen. I really like Chris Rock. Even Kevin James, who I don't really have any reason to like, has some degree of likability. I've never watched Rob Schneider in anything and thought, yes, that's a talented individual who deserves to be in front of the camera. And when I was watching these Adam Sandler movies as a teenager, I was also watching The Hot Chick and The Animal and all the Rob Schneider is XYZ
Deuce Bigelow
films he was putting out. Yeah. And they never, even as a kid, I could kind of tell, this guy isn't operating on the same level as his friends.
They were very successful, though, those Schneider movies.
Yeah.
Like, Deuce Bigelow, just, purely anecdotally, as a kid, I can remember being a huge playground hit, There was a big one when I was very early into high school. Everyone raved about that. And I think those movies did... Maybe just the first one of Deuce Bigelow, but Deuce Bigelow and The Animal, from memory, they made coin. People went out and saw them. He did have a high point of his career. It was a very long time ago, and I think it was quite briefly lived, unfortunately.
I wonder how much South Park killed his career. Grown Ups too. I mean, I've made a surprising amount of notes here, but it really is just jotting down, I can't believe so-and-so's in this film. What are they doing?
Well, that's it. I thought, the idea of watching this film every week for a year is obviously insane. But having watched it, there's so much here to deal with. There's I think I could get 50 hours of material out of this film. Because there's so many little things where why did they just do that? I can't believe that's a thing.
Give me some examples, Alan. Go off. I want to hear you get into this.
We start, if your film in the first 90 seconds has a CGI deer pissing in your face, that, I think you're in for a couple of hours of hardcore social realism.
You might know you're a redneck when you open your film.
The most amazing thing about that opening with the deer is
how long it lasts.
Not just that, but the justification for it is that the kid left the front door open. So of course that means a deer walks in the house, up the stairs, and starts pissing on Adam Sandler in bed. It's quite a leap, that, and
I mean, they go all in on it. That scene lasts so long. It's not a throwaway joke.
It runs all around the house and
everybody
pisses
panic.
On everyone. It breaks into the shower, pisses on a kid in the shower.
It manages to run around the house without breaking anything apart from just knocking a couple of things off the side. Almost as if it wasn't really there and they just had a couple of fishing lines.
Oh, come on, Alan. Suspend your disbelief a little bit, brother.
But I mean, can't you just let a deer loose in a house? Wouldn't that be funnier, ultimately?
Couldn't find a unionized deer in LA, unfortunately. Yeah, there's no in-between with the moose. It's either stationary or CGI, or it's hell for leather, but there's no middle ground.
another line that I couldn't quite tell what level it was working on, and I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I was laughing at the film or with the film, was at the end of that scene, the stag, the deer, the moose, whatever it is, has got a load of laundry on its antlers, and
just a single bra.
A single bra. So it's Adam Sandler's wife's bra, Salma Hayek, and the postman turns up and he high-fives Adam Sandler and says, "Is that your bra, Mrs. Fader?"
Yeah.
Like, that's not a joke, even.
No, it's just saying she's got really good tits.
Yeah.
I got that a lot. I was sort of like, that was it. I was sort of laughing at the I can't believe this is happening sort of thing. But let's give it to well-known comedy actor Salma Hayek. She seems a little bit out of place, but she seems to hold her own. She does all right.
Isn't she in 30 Rock?
No, she's done quite a lot of comedy by this stage. Oh, well, like, I don't know, around Grown Ups 2's release, but present day, 2021, she's done tons. She's done other films with Adam Sandler as well, I think. He kind of brought her into the Sandlerverse to do stuff. I think she's pretty great, personally. I think given the material that she has to work with, and given that she's not from the same sort of background and pedigree as some of these other women who are in the picture who are like Saturday Night Live alumni, professional comedians, stand-ups and improvisers, I think she does a pretty admirable job of dealing with the dastardly Adam Sandler on a holiday making a movie.
There's a scene with Salma Hayek. She's opened up a little fashion boutique or something like that, and she has a woman working for her. And we have a scene where that woman, who I recognise, I've seen her in Saturday Night Live things.
Sherry Terry. Or Terry Sherry, I always get it the wrong way around.
We set up that she has some backstory with Adam Sandler. And, of course, I assumed that would go nowhere. It was just a standalone scene about this weird woman. But they do bring it back later on, twice. Doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't actually provide anything. But she comes back a couple of times. And then they connect her to Steve Buscemi, who's already been established as a character.
Well, there you go.
That went nowhere.
There's connective tissue, Alan. They're in a relationship. What more do you want?
I would argue that this film has roughly the same story structure that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has, which, was lauded with Oscar nominations and things. Quentin Tarantino's
not by me,
where...
it wasn't. I hated it.
But it's kind of,
I'm with you, Alan. I walked out of that. I'll just say this about that picture. I walked out of that being like too embarrassed to say that I really didn't like it, but I was like, the fuck is that?
Yeah. But it's the same kind of structure in that basically loads of stuff happens that isn't remotely connected, and then they remember, we need to kind of bring it all together at the end, and then there's a big kind of fight scene where everything all pays off and it all kind of goes right. Okay, well, payoff is perhaps a bit strong. Where it all gets referenced again. Do
you think Quentin he got kind of writer's block? He'd written himself into a corner and he chucked on his tried and true Grown Ups 2 Blu-ray and he went, I've got it. This is how I'll end my movie.
This is exactly the sort of weird wildcard film that would appear in Quentin Tarantino's top 10 of, 2013 or whatever it was. He always has a weird, bad film in the mix that he, really latches onto.
Didn't he? Am I imagining this? Didn't he want Adam Sandler to play the bear Jew?
Oh, he did. He did. Inglourious Basterds.
Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it.
Which I can see. Like, that does seem like an Adam Sandler role.
Who did he want him to play?
The bear Jew, they call him. He ended up being played by Eli Roth in the end, I think.
Wow.
So he's the one of the little team who is like the big guy who just storms in, is really aggressive.
With a baseball bat.
So very Adam Sandler, actually.
Yeah, I forgot about that. But yeah, well, he recognises talent, and his big thing is revitalising, failed careers, which is what that would have done for Adam Sandler probably had he taken that. Well, maybe not, but certainly would have given him a bit of credibility.
Adam Sandler's doing fine. He's doing fine. I think Adam Sandler...
He's in a movie jail of his own choice, isn't he? Yeah.
And he can come out, and he does every now and then. He's on house arrest, but it's a very lax house arrest. Like, no one's really checking. And he put himself there. He just walks outside with his oversized basketball t-shirt and his long baggy shorts on, and no one pays it much mind. And they're like, oh, nice to see you again, Adam.
I'm looking at a list of Happy Madison productions, right? So this is This is Adam Sandler's films that he's in some of them, but he's the one making the money at the back end of all this. He's the producer. Yeah. And the vast majority of these are making a very solid profit, even if they're crap. Like
even Jack and Jill made a serious amount of money. I remember it being a big, not quite scandal, but all these film sites, reporting, oh, for God's sake, it's made loads of money.
And in fact, one of the few films here that didn't make a profit is Funny People, which is the good one. So, there's obviously quality doesn't equal money in Hollywood. It's not about that. But ultimately, you'd think long term that there has to be some end to that, because people stop going, oh, I like Adam Sandler films, I'll go and pay and see that. They go, oh, Adam Sandler films are actually quite crap, I won't go and pay and see that. But that doesn't seem to happen. It just seems that people just keep watching them.
I mean, I don't want to go too, disparaging towards the general public, but I think these are largely quite crowd-pleasing films for the lowest common denominator. I think people go along, they want to see a load of stars on screen. They get that. If you're there with a big group of friends, or one of the worst things is being dragged to a film that, is an actual kind of artistic expression of something, but you don't like it or it doesn't work, and you're sat there like, oh, this is terrible, but my friend's enjoying it. Whereas with something like Grown Ups 2, it might not be great, but I think everyone can just sort of sit there and take it in, and that probably goes a long way towards...
I feel like if I watched Grown Ups 2 with a group of my friends, it'd be like if I watched a sex show with a group of my friends. Like, afterwards, you might get some kind of base enjoyment out of it, but you wouldn't be able to look each other in the eye. You would have to just go home.
It would be a bonding experience.
You wouldn't be able to go for a drink afterwards or anything like that.
This is collective trauma.
And then someone would bring it up at a wedding speech.
I don't know. He's got a brand, and it seems to be as strong as ever, for what it's doing. It's just, he's not making these for us, Alan. I think that's...
Well, do you know what? I'm looking at this list of Happy Madison productions, and it does seem like in the early years, he was making crap films with his friends in them, and now he's just putting himself in them as well. Like, that seems to be the crucial difference between the early 2000s and now. So like the first one they did was Juice Bigelow, then Little Nicky, but then you got Joe Dirt, which is a David Spade vehicle, The Animal, that's Rob Schneider, Master of Disguise,
oh wow,
which is Dana Carvey.
I didn't know that was a Happy Madison film.
Apparently, according to this Wikipedia list.
It tracks. I guess he was trying to launch all his friends' careers, and
he did in a lot of ways.
At this point, they've all just settled into a...
The thing is that you've got to appreciate about what Sandler's done is he has supported a lot of people. Like, it's not just the stars and the comedians, but there is a whole production apparatus around him that every time one of these movies spins up, they get paid again. I have a huge suspicion. I think this is based on like sparse bits of evidence that Guy and I've received over the years of people, feeding stuff through to us and just things I've watched in interviews and that. I think he really looks after people who are part of that crew. And I think he's got a lot of families relying on him now. Like, this is the machine he's built. There's a lot of grips, sparkies, camera assists, focus pullers, editors, sound designers who... amongst their other work, they know that they've got a good, bankable, not too challenging payday because they've got a Sandler film coming up.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the other scenes I've made a note of here. I've written down ice cream poo scene.
A classic.
There's a scene in the film where they go to a food stall and the guy is trying to fix the ice cream machine.
Yeah, it's chocolate ice cream.
It's chocolate ice cream, which, as you do, soft serve whippy chocolate ice cream, and he kind of climbs on top of the machine so that he's pressing down on the lever, and it looks like ice cream's coming out from between his legs.
It looks like he's shitting. Soul, it's a good gag. It's a sight gag. We can all enjoy the sight of Colin Quinn, celebrated stand-up comedian and TV personality Colin Quinn, looking like he's taking a big sticky dump into a tub.
For at least 45 seconds.
It's the way everyone passing by stops and looks like, whoa, what's going on?
Alan, I will give you that. Yes. It might go on a smidge too long.
The way this film is edited, it has the feel of a movie that's struggling to get up to 80 minutes, which they're like contractually obligated to do. But it's actually quite a long film for a comedy. It's like 1 hour 41 or something. So it's a very weird approach they take with stuff like that.
I'll tell you another big difference between this and the first film as well. The first film has a lot of stuff with the kids in it, but really more focused on how, as an adult, you relate to your kids and the different approaches to parenting and all that sort of, and the problems that come with that, which I imagine is very relevant to people. I haven't got kids myself. But I'm sure that Adam Sandler, you know, he's got kids and it's all kind of part of his he's bringing his truth to comedy. In the second film, the kids are mostly there just as props. There's a couple of older boys who are now old enough to carry a couple of scenes by themselves, but they know they don't really go anywhere. And I don't think Kevin James actually interacts with his kids at any point. His kids are in it, but they're like hanging out with Adam Sandler's kids, and like
he does it in one scene only. He walks in. Where his wife is desperately trying to homeschool their kid very unsuccessfully with basic mathematics, and he basically calls his son a dumbass in a way that would go over his head, and then calls out his daughter who's wearing some particularly flashy boots that she has decorated herself.
Oh yes.
So it's basically he walks out, he goes fuck you, and then he goes to work.
What I really do like, I guess we get it more in the first film, but what I really like, and this goes for real life as well, is when people raise their kids in a certain way so that they behave and then hate them for it. I love that. Like, you teach your child that, you know, confidence is more important than accuracy, especially when it comes to basic mathematics, and then get annoyed when they can't do mathematics. And and then the girl turns up, and she's a teenage girl. She's like 13 or something. She turns up with these boots on that she's made, like with 59 pieces of flair on them, and I think like, oh, this is gonna go. Someone's gonna bully her for having stupid shoes, or they're gonna love the shoes. She's really popular.
They do. Her dad bullies her for having stupid shoes.
Yeah, it's just basically it's basically a 45-year-old man going, oh, kids, I don't understand what's going on there.
But the funny thing is, what you've just described is sort of the classic sense of comedy born of the tragedy of the human condition. We are the engineers of our own sadness. We are the ones who set up all of the conditions which create the effect that frustrates us. And that is kind of pure comedy and tragedy. But it's like you've taken the meta-analysis and it sounds really good on paper. It does not translate that well in grown-ups too, I can assure you. Dear listener.
Can we talk about Nick Swardson a bit? Because he is probably the biggest element of this film that is new, as in not in the first film. And he never feels quite connected to the others. He's not there to replace Rob Schneider, but they've obviously got a lot of faith in him to play the idiot and to do all the pratfalls. And maybe it's just like, oh, Kevin James can't fall over anymore. He's kind of he's too old. But he's doing all the physical stuff, really, and playing the fool. And we first see him, he's the school bus driver, and he's intoxicated on some kind of medication. And so, you know, as you would as a concerned parent, you help him cover that up. You don't report him to the authorities or anything.
Of course.
But good news is Adam Sandler has an LGV license and is fully insured to drive children around. So he takes over. He also hasn't got a job anymore. None of them have jobs in this, is that like, or at least they don't have jobs that they have to go to on this particular day.
One of them's like a cable guy.
Chris Rock works for the cable company, yeah.
Yeah, we see him tormenting an old woman, not doing
well,
his job.
Well, that's his mother-in-law. You got to pay such close attention to get this, but that is his own mother-in-law.
Well, that's it. If you guys had done the homework properly and watched Grown Ups, you'd know she's in that, and so I recognised her because I watched them back to back. But yeah,
Isn't Adam Sandler a cable guy in that Pixels movie as well?
I think so.
And then Kevin James has a job, but also doesn't actually go to the job at any point. The kids are all in their last day of school, but don't go to school at any point. Apart from
it's the last day, you don't go on your last day.
Yeah, you know.
Bunk off
and then
drink.
David Spade has a son, a 20-year-old son who turns up that he never knew about, sends him to school with some 15-year-olds. How do you enroll a child in school for one day? the last day of summer? Wouldn't they just go, look, don't bother?
We see the kids going down to the creek and hanging out, and the dads all go along independently as well, and then they get accosted by the kid out of Twilight, the werewolf one,
Taylor Lautner.
Do you know what? Right, there's the germ of a really good idea here. I think they grasped on something. This group of adults going back to when they were kids, like, oh, it's the last day, it's the day of summer. You know, it's reminded of our summer holidays. We used to go down the creek and jump in the quarry, and you remember you were always too afraid, and then it just goes nowhere. And you could relate that to, oh, now our kids are doing that. Our kids are the same age. Oh, aren't things different to when we were kids? Oh, no, maybe they're not that different. Maybe I've bonded with my son in a way I didn't do before. No, none of that happens. They just get bullied by some dickheads. Some
frat boys.
You're so right about that. They create the setup for that to happen and then just fumble the ball. And they could so easily have made that juicy human moment, and they just don't.
And then they all get naked and have to jump off this thing, and they don't manage to get any comedy from nakedness. How can you get 4 middle-aged flabby men naked and not get any comedy out of it?
There's a detail I really like, and again, I don't know if it's intended as a joke or if it's something weird that happened on set or what. But yeah, they all get naked and jump in the creek, and Kevin James still has his shoes and socks on, which implies that he took his shoes and socks off to get naked and then put them back on to jump into the creek, which is such a weird...
It's comedy, baby.
Detail, yeah.
That is pretty funny.
I think it's pretty funny when Kevin James comes down as the sort of fat man, for all intents and purposes for the jokes among the group of friends, and lands on top of David Spade, and then they joke about how David Spade has entered Kevin James.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's it.
Isn't that funny? Is that what comedy is, guys? I've lost track.
It's such a level 1 joke as well. Like, you know, it's just...
I've made another note of a joke that actually made me laugh, and I actually legitimately enjoyed, which is Steve Buscemi, it turns out, is a driving instructor. He's giving one of the kids a driving test, and then a load of older kids... So that kid was pretending to be drunk earlier to fit in with these older kids.
Yeah.
And then a load of them pull up alongside him while he's taking his driving test, and so he pretends to be drunk. He's like, oh yeah, I'm totally drunk, to them through the window. And then Steve Buscemi looks at him and says,
taking your driver's test while intoxicated? -5 points.
And I don't know if I was so starved for comedy at that point or what, but I laughed out loud. It was, you know, it was a good delivery, I think. I think that's
Credit where it's due. It was a good joke. I think that was funny.
Well, that kid who is one of Chris Rock's character's children, I guess, he's an interesting one because on this day, it's the last day of school before summer. He goes to school. We see him at school. Then he goes to the quarry and pretend to be drunk, because you know what 16-year-olds are like. They don't want to get drunk.
Yeah.
So then they pretend to be drunk and touch women. And then he takes a driver's test, and then we don't see him. He's not at the party, is he? Does he turn up at the end?
There's a point where he asks a girl out. Is that him? Or is that...
No, that's his sister getting asked out by someone else.
Who's the kid who Adam Sandler gives like a 3-point checklist of how to...
It's Adam Sandler's son.
Oh yeah, that goes nowhere. He asks her out, but that goes nowhere.
That's the payoff. That's the setup payoff, Alan. That's the structure there. He took his dad's advice and it worked. That's your story arc seen out.
That young man is a former child star Disney kid who tragically passed away a couple of years ago of like a weird heart thing. Yeah.
Hang on, is that him? No, he's the other one. I think he's the younger one.
Oh, you're right. That's the older one is the one who goes on the date with Becky. Yeah.
But died when he was 20 years old, he said. And not even in a cocaine-fueled binge. It was not just a fun one. Medical problem.
Yeah.
He was still actually successful.
So the film kind of... It all culminates in this party that they've been talking about throughout the film, and it's like a barbecue, but then loads of people turn up who weren't invited. It's a fancy dress party, and I assumed the theme was music, because everyone's dressed up as a musician from like the 80s. But then I did notice someone dressed up as Indiana Jones and Donald Trump at one scene. Like like the costume designer, you know.
The theme was 80s. And as someone who's seen the movie literally 55 times, I can tell you, you're dead wrong, Sol. The theme was the 1980s.
Well, I assumed it had to be the 80s when I started seeing those people, but it's really skewered towards musicians. It's like 90% people dressed up as musicians and Donald Trump, Indiana Jones, and a Smurf. I think they're the only people who... Oh, and Hulk Hogan as well, actually, to be fair.
There's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Is there?
Aren't the Smurfs from the 60s? Isn't that? Oh, it's just because the guy got painted 80s. Blue earlier on and they just had to make it work.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Alan, this is the second film in a row that we've spoken about on this show that features people dressed up as Smurfs.
That's good. We'll have to do the Smurfs next.
But yeah, there's a big fancy dress party, and it basically just doesn't go anywhere until all the frat boys turn up and start a huge fight with them to give us a kind of third act climax. You know, the film really does feel like Avengers Endgame in that it is just like every single star from Hollywood you could possibly imagine turning up one after the other throughout the film, and then they all have a big fight at the end. But the structure's not really as impressive this time round. I did notice, actually, I don't know if Tim, you might be able to speak to this, but it seemed like they had about 3 punch sound effects that they just used over and over and over again in that fight scene at the end, often one after another, just the same.
It's insane that they dwelled so much on that final fight scene because they made the 90-minute mark, which I think we can all agree is the finish line for something to be counted as a movie. But instead they dwell on this fight scene. The choreography is very bad. If you mute that scene, it is truly terrible. And if you watch anyone in the background who's doing the fight choreography, it's laughably shocking. Like, people aren't even getting near to connecting with their punches. It's just, there's a whole... Guy and I have spent a long time just absorbing ourselves in the background actors during that final fight scene, looking at the nonsense they're up to. It is a sight to behold.
I mean, the scene doesn't... I thought they're not just going to all have a fight where literally everyone, not just sort of dickhead men, but wives, children, pets, are all getting involved in this fight, which is a proper physical altercation. I thought it was going to like play out in some ironic way, but no, they have a big fight. They all get punched, and then obviously they don't get hurt or injured in any way because it's a film. And then it's just like, oh yeah, we've had a good cathartic fight. We've honor is served, and we can go on with our lives now.
I couldn't shake the feeling when I was watching it of, you know, if this happened in real life, it would be really unpleasant. There'd be, you know, it would be trending on Twitter. There'd be videos on phones going round of like this horrible altercation between a load of frat boys, and it's, you know, it's hundreds of people. It's, to give the film credit, they didn't skimp on extras. There's loads of people on screen. It's a big fight. It's like
they're all Adam Sandler's family, though. It's like
yeah, it's presumably where they, you know, said to everyone, "Oh, you can be in the film here." Yeah, and yeah, that is the end of the film. It just kind of ends. There's no real wrap up because there's no real plot.
Salma Hayek's pregnant. We learned that.
Oh, true. Yeah,
I forgot about that whole plot line.
And then the music played over the end, which really, really surprised me because it's the music you use as the theme tune for The Worst Idea of All Time, and I never quite clocked that's why you use that song at the start. It was like, oh my god, there it is.
I don't think we ever like explicitly. Oh, maybe we did. We probably did actually, but I can't remember if we made much mention of the fact that that's what we were playing. But there's an REO Speedwagon song called, ironically, Live Every Moment, Love Every Day, which we thought was just the perfect thing to keep telling ourselves as we keep wasting our time reviewing this movie again and again and again.
I mean, fair play to them. They figured out a way to be very successful.
Yeah.
I will say, you know, as I say it, when I looked up Grown Ups, I'd given it 2 out of 10 on IMDb.
That's not 1.
Yeah. And when I came to rate this one, I gave it a 3 out of 10.
Look at you.
And I don't know if that's just that I don't know if that suggests that it's somehow more enjoyable, or just I went into the first one with a really bad mood because I knew you liked it, Alan. I think
maybe you were just expecting it to be a real film, and then by the time you get to Grown Ups 2, you were like, okay, I know this is going to be nonsense.
I was expecting the absolute worst. And I was surprised at how just kind of... I could just let it wash over me. It was one of those. It was like, oh, this isn't completely and utterly terrible. But yeah, I give it a 3 out of 10. Alan, what would you give it?
Well, I also gave it a 3 out of 10. But in relation to Grown Ups, I gave Grown Ups a 5 out of 10. Because it was still watchable, even though it was a bit lazy and crap, but it was fine. But yeah, this is just shoddy, really. I don't even know why I gave it 3, to be just that kind of likability of some of the actors.
Tim, if you had to...
1.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Valid, yeah.
So, Grown Ups 3, do we think that's something that will ever happen? Do we think...
I bloody well hope not, because I promise that if they make it, Guy and I have to watch it for 2 years in a row.
Oh my. I mean, that is incredible because, 1 year round is 52 times. And then if I remember correctly, you did a few extra
Yeah, we kind of fucked up the timing because we went to Los Angeles to do the final episode. We did a bit of a tour around the state, so we ended up watching it too many times.
But that's so many times to watch a film. I produced a film a while back. And like even that film that I was sat in the editing room for, different cuts and so on, I don't think I watched it 52 times. Even with all the screenings and so on that I had to go to, it was maybe 30 times at a push. Like 52 is a lot. I don't think I've seen any film 52 times.
Yeah, I definitely think we've seen Grown Ups 2 more than anyone on Earth, including the editors, to be frank.
Yeah. Definitely more than Adam Sandler.
If you detect a note of pride in my voice there, you are mistaken. It is shame and embarrassment.
Well, presumably you are now the person who's seen Grown Ups 2 the most out of anyone, because you've seen it once more than Guy now.
I have a funny feeling I text Guy, because I think he fell asleep during a watch, so I text him a punishment watch. So maybe we're even now.
That does ring a bell, actually, yeah. Grown Ups 3, I mean, it's not even worth talking about what they could do in Grown Ups 3, because the answer is they don't need a plot. They've demonstrated that. They don't seem interested in plot. All they'd have to do is get everyone together to Adam Sandler's mansion for a week. Every scene in this film, or not every scene, but most scenes in this film feel like, John Lovitz, for example. We've got John Lovitz for the day. What are we going to do with him? I don't know. It takes them about 40 minutes to set the cameras and lighting up. So while they're doing that, we'll just workshop something, figure it out, and then he can just riff it.
Should we tell the other actors to act like real women would in this situation? No, that won't be funny. Tell them to act in an extremely...
Exactly.
If they acted like real people, then the scene might become, very dark and unpleasant in a way that would,
Oh yeah, it would reveal what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tim, for joining us and for enduring, going back to this trauma from your life again.
It's been nice to talk to you both. It has not been nice to revisit this movie.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do it for us.
Of course.
Is there anything you want to plug while you're here?
New Zealand, as at time of recording, is in lockdown for the first time in a little while. We were all good for a bit, and then we've gone back into lockdown because Delta came here. So I've brought back a streaming comedy and art show called Happening that I did in the last lockdown. And if you want to see the silly nonsense that I'm doing, playing games with my friends, playing people's submissions, people are making short films and animations and sending music in. We're just having a virtual hangout and doing that. You can go to happeningshow.com to check it out.
And I will say we have a fair few Australian listeners for whatever reason. So I'm assuming you probably go over there to do a bit of stand-up when things aren't locked down, Tim.
Yes, when we can.
I will just say to our Australian listeners, Tim is a very good stand-up comic. His stuff's very good. So, when things are open again, keep an eye out for him. He's well worth
cheers, so
checking out.
See you soon, coppers.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.